Welcome to the module on Classification of Costs. Learning Objectives. Classification of Costs, Meaning and Applicability. Components of Total Costs. Meaning of Direct and Indirect Costs. Classification of costs based on the basis of function. Classification of costs based on variability. We all are familiar with the term cost. It has become a part and parcel of our daily lives. In management accounting, we have to determine the costs of a product, or cost, incurred while rendering a service. Classification of costs is the essential first step to determine the cost of a unit of product, or service. In understanding cost, from the perspective of the subject of management accounting, kindly increase your horizon and imagine a manufacturing or a service organization, and consider the various aspects of costs involved therein. Classification of costs basically means the grouping of costs according to their characteristics. There are multiple ways to classify costs as per their nature, functions, traceability, etc. Let us look at different ways of classifying costs. Generally, the total cost incurred while providing a service, or developing a product, consists of the following costs. That is, cost of raw materials, cost of labor, cost of other expenses such as rent, power, etc. Each of these costs components are further classified as direct, or indirect nature of costs. Direct cost is a cost which can be traced in full to the product, or service. Indirect cost is incurred while rendering a service, or manufacturing a product, but cannot be fully traced to the product or the service. Thus, the total material cost is a sum of direct material cost and indirect material cost. Direct material cost consists of materials that become part of the product, or are used in rendering services, whereas indirect material costs cannot be traced directly to the finished product. In a similar way, total labor cost is a sum of direct labor cost and indirect labor cost. Direct labor cost includes wages paid to the labor involved in the manufacturing of the product or rendering the service. Indirect labor costs include all costs not covered by direct labor costs. Direct expenses are any expenses incurred on a specific product other than direct material and direct labor costs. For example, costs incurred while maintenance of machines is a direct expense. Indirect expenses are those which cannot be charged directly to the production. The depreciation cost is an indirect expense. Costs are also classified on the basis of function. Production costs include costs involved in producing the goods. These costs are associated with the factory. Administration costs include costs that are involved in the administration and running of the organization. Selling costs include expenses incurred in selling the product to the final consumers. Distribution costs include indirect costs incurred while distributing the product from the manufacturing site to the final customer. Research costs are those incurred while searching for a new or improved product. Development costs are incurred while developing them from the concept stage until the commencement of the manufacture of the product. On the basis of variability, costs are classified into fixed costs and variable costs. A fixed cost is that cost that is incurred for a particular period of time, and which remains unchanged as the output changes, within certain activity levels. Even when the output is zero, some amount of fixed cost has to be incurred. Example, rent paid for the factory building. Variable cost is that cost which changes in the same proportion in which the output changes. When the output is zero, variable cost is also zero. Example, direct wages paid to a laborer. Kindly note, fixed remains constant in total, and vary per unit, whereas variable cost remains constant per unit, and varies in total. We also have a third classification, called semi-variable cost. This cost contains the elements of both fixed cost, as well as that of variable cost. Therefore, this cost is partly affected, due to changes in the level of production. The electricity bill is an ideal example of this type of cost. In this video, we understood the importance of classification of costs in management accounting. It is the essential first step to determine the cost of a unit of product or service. We understood the meaning of direct and indirect costs. We also learned that costs can be classified on the basis of function and on the basis of variability.